The clerk at the gas station had just started his shift when the young man stumbled in off the highway. His feet were bare, skin cracked from the sun, clothes shredded and clinging to his frame like rags draped over bones. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there swaying under the fluorescent lights, eyes sunken, lips parched, staring at the rows of candy bars like they were something sacred. "You okay, man?" the clerk asked, already reaching for the phone. The stranger blinked slowly, like the question had taken a moment to reach him. "Water," he croaked. "Please." His voice was dry gravel. While the clerk fetched a bottle, the man collapsed onto a plastic chair near the window. That's when the details began to settle. He wasn't just sunburned, he was scorched. His fingernails were blackened at the edges, and a faded scar curved beneath his jawline like a stitched smile. His hands trembled violently as he drank, but his eyes were far away. A sheriff's deputy arrived 10 minutes later. By then, the stranger had only said one thing, his name. Connor. No last name, no ID. But when asked where he'd come from, he paused, stared out toward the endless Utah desert, and whispered, "There were 4 of us." The words hung in the air like smoke. Connor Hale. That name hadn't been spoken in 7 years. Not since the spring break of 2018, when 4 teenagers vanished without a trace near the Maze District of Canyonlands National Park. Their disappearance had become an urban legend in Utah campfire fodder, a warning whispered by hikers about getting too bold in backcountry trails. Search parties found their car. Nothing else. No blood, no bodies, just silence. Until now. Connor was taken to a hospital in Moab, placed under observation, and questioned by authorities. His answers were fractured, scattered like shards of a broken mirror. "Tunnels," he said once. Another time, "They wouldn't let us leave." Nurses reported night terrors. He screamed in his sleep. One phrase kept coming up over and over again. "The kin are still out there." And so began the unraveling of a mystery buried under 7 years of desert silence. A story that started with 4 teenagers and ended, for now, with only one coming back. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. 4 teenagers bound by friendship and the invincible belief that nothing bad could ever happen to them, piled into a silver Subaru and drove south out of Salt Lake City. It was spring break, April 2018, and the Utah desert stretched before them like a promise. There was no itinerary, no real plan. Just a cooler full of snacks, a map dotted with half-researched trailheads, and a craving for something unforgettable. Ethan Ridge, 18, was the ringleader. Tall, athletic, full of restless energy, he had the kind of confidence that made people follow him without question. He was the one who'd found the camping spot deep in the Maze District, one of the most isolated corners of Canyonlands National Park. "No tourists," he'd promised. "No cell signal. Just us and the stars." Maya Black, 17, sat shotgun, knees curled up on the seat, sketchbook in her lap. Quiet and observant, she'd drawn them all countless times, Ethan laughing, Riley scowling, Connor lost in thought. Her dark hair was always tucked behind one ear, her expression unreadable. She was the kind of girl who listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, people listened. Connor Hale, 18, was the thoughtful one, reserved, soft-spoken. He brought philosophy books and a first aid kit, the kind of friend you wanted around in case something actually did go wrong. He didn't say much on the drive, but he smiled when Maya passed him a stick of gum, and he rolled his eyes when Ethan tried to freestyle rap over the music. And Riley Sampson, the youngest at 16, rode in the back with his headphones in and his hood up. He was Ethan's cousin, tagging along partly because he had nowhere else to be, and partly because he wanted to prove he could keep up. Angry at the world but loyal to the group, Riley was unpredictable and sharp. His sarcasm a constant hum in the car. They drove with the windows down, desert wind tangling their hair, laughter spilling out onto Highway 191. They didn't know, couldn't have known, that they were driving straight into a place where laughter didn't echo back. A place where roads end, maps lie, and time forgets your name. By nightfall, they were pitching tents beneath a sky full of stars. somewhere near a rock formation called the Devil's Spine. It was the last time all four were ever seen. The sign was half buried in red dust, letters faded from sun and time. Permit required beyond this point. Ethan laughed as he stepped around it. "We'll be fine," he said, brushing off Connor's concern about not logging their route with the ranger station. "We're not going that far anyway." But that wasn't true. He had circled this trail on the map weeks ago, drawn in by the lack of reviews, the whispered reputation among climbers and survival forums, the unnamed slot canyons south of the maze. The Maze District wasn't like the rest of Canyonlands. It was labyrinthine, remote, with stone spires and twisting canyons that swallowed GPS signals and shredded boots. Rescue teams called it a black hole. Even rangers avoided its deeper corners. But for four teenagers chasing something unforgettable, that just made it perfect. Their packs were light, too light in hindsight. They brought 2 gallons of water per person, a borrowed tent, and a printed map Ethan had marked with alternate trails. The area they were heading into didn't even have names on the official park maps, just topographic lines and ambiguous ridges. Connor hesitated at the edge of the canyon, staring into the shimmering expanse. "It doesn't look like the pictures," he said quietly. Maya took photos, Polaroids mostly, and one digital camera Riley had stolen from his older brother. She snapped a shot of the vast red basin below, of Ethan balancing on a ledge, of Riley flipping the camera off. The sun was high, their spirits higher. As the trail dipped deeper into the canyon, the world changed. Sound softened. Heat pressed in. The sandstone walls narrowed, rose higher. The sky became a sliver. They passed a stone cairn with a strip of torn fabric tied to it, faded green, like it had once been part of a jacket. Ethan said it was probably nothing. That evening they reached a place Ethan had marked as Cave Arch, though no official record listed it. It wasn't much, just a natural overhang beside a rock wall streaked with ancient petroglyphs, stick figures, circles, eyes. Riley pointed at one that looked like a spiral inside a skull and muttered, "That's not creepy at all." They made camp beneath it, laughed, played music, drank from lukewarm canteens, and as the stars blinked awake above the maze, something ancient blinked back. It was 7:40, 1 p.m. when Maya uploaded the last photo. A blurry trailhead selfie, her face partially in frame, wind in her hair, Ethan grinning behind her with both arms raised in mock triumph. Riley stood off to the side, hoodie up, flipping the peace sign. Connor wasn't in it. Maybe he was taking the picture. Maybe he just didn't want to be. The caption read, "Off-grid for a few days. Don't wait up." Her phone pinged with likes for a few minutes. Then it went quiet, just like everything else. The families remembered the post clearly. Maya's mom had commented, "Have fun, be safe, KDO1. Riley's older brother had texted him a joke about not getting eaten by coyotes. It showed as delivered. It was never read. At first, no one noticed the silence. They were teenagers in the desert. No signal was expected. A few days with no calls or texts didn't raise alarms. But by day 4, something shifted. Ethan's dad sent a message. "Check in when you get out." Maya's sister texted, "You guys alive?" Connor's phone went straight to voicemail. Riley's rang, then stopped. By day 6, Maya's post became a digital gravestone. No one posted again, no check-ins, no tags. A storm rolled through Canyonlands that week, brief but brutal. Wind gusts over 40 miles per hour. Flash floods carved through the canyons, erasing footprints and shifting rocks. When the teens missed school the following Monday, parents assumed they just extended the trip. Then calls started bouncing. Messages stacked unanswered. By day 8, panic bloomed. The parents drove to the trailhead Maya had tagged. Rangers found the Subaru, dusty and undisturbed, backpacks still in the trunk, a crushed protein bar wrapper on the floor. The driver's seat adjusted perfectly for Ethan's long legs. But no gear missing, no signs of struggle. The trail log at the base had no entry under their names. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. The families stood at the edge of the desert, staring into the abyss of red rock and silence, waiting for a sound that would never come. It was as if the earth had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. It was day 10 when Ranger Luis Moreno spotted a silver Subaru Outback parked off a primitive road near Chimney Rock, caked in red dust, one tire slightly low, the windshield half covered in wind-blown grit. He recognized it instantly. The plate number had been circulated 3 days earlier, when the parents filed the missing persons reports. 4 names, 4 teens, no sign of any of them. The car sat like a fossilized memory, untouched, undisturbed. The doors were locked. The interior was orderly in a way that felt wrong. There was a bag of trail mix on the passenger seat, unopened. A map lay folded in the center console, corners worn soft from use. Connor's paperback copy of Into the Wild sat face down on the dash like it had been placed there absent-mindedly and forgotten. The keys were still in the ignition. A ranger cracked the door open, half expecting a smell, a scene, some evidence of violence. But there was nothing, not a single drop of blood, no scuffle, no sign of panic. Just silence, the same unnerving quiet that had surrounded this case from the start. The only disturbance was a faint layer of desert silt inside, too subtle to suggest a struggle, too settled to suggest a recent return. Their gear was mostly intact: tents, extra food, 2 spare water jugs. The only thing missing was what they'd taken into the canyon: 2 backpacks, a first aid kit, 4 canteens. Enough for a day hike, maybe 2. The car's battery was still alive. When a ranger turned the key, the engine clicked but didn't start. The tank was almost full. Whatever had happened, it hadn't started here. When Maya's mother arrived an hour later, she reached through the open window and touched the shoulder strap of her daughter's backpack. Her hand shook. "They wouldn't just leave this," she whispered. "Not Maya, not for this long." She was right. Teenagers get lost. They don't vanish without a trace. But that's exactly what had happened. Somewhere out in that labyrinth of canyons, 4 teenagers had walked into the wild and never walked back out. The first chopper lifted off just after sunrise. A Bell 407, painted in faded Park Service green, its rotor wash stirring up dust as it climbed into the heat-shimmered sky above Canyonlands. Inside were 2 rangers and a spotter with binoculars pressed hard against his face, scanning for anything: movement, footprints, scraps of clothing. But from above, the desert looked like a painting, still, indifferent, infinite. By noon, the search expanded. Search and rescue teams from 3 counties, volunteers on ATVs, 2 cadaver dogs from Grand Junction, and a drone unit flown in from Salt Lake. They scoured the trails near the car, then pushed deeper into the maze, into the slot canyons, into places where even experienced hikers hesitated. The sun beat down relentlessly. Temperatures hit 97 degrees F by the second day. The heat bounced off the rock like punishment. Radios crackled with updates, most of them the same. No sign. The dogs picked up a faint scent near a dry wash south of the Devil's Spine but lost it after 200 yards. A drone spotted what looked like a tarp flapping on a ridge. It turned out to be a bleached-out t-shirt tangled in scrub. Time stretched thin. Each hour felt like a countdown. By day 3, they found a single boot print near a rock shelf, but it was too weathered to date. A park volunteer spotted something shiny in a crevice. It was Riley's belt buckle. Then nothing. The trails misled, twisting and doubling back. Canyons that looked short opened into miles of dead ends. Maps were unreliable. Compass needles spun in circles near some of the rock formations. It was as if the desert wanted them lost too. Still, they pressed on. Ethan's father walked 6 miles into the backcountry without backup, calling his son's name into the canyons. Maya's mother collapsed from heat exhaustion. A paramedic told her to rest. She refused. At night, the desert froze. Temperatures dropped 40 degrees. Rescuers huddled in tents, listening to the wind whisper through the rocks, as if the desert itself was breathing secrets. By day 6, one fact became uncomfortably clear. They weren't searching for lost teenagers anymore. They were looking for bodies. On the morning of the 7th day, a tracker named Elise Morton, retired military, now volunteering with Grand County Search and Rescue, noticed something most had missed. Just beyond the base of a narrow sandstone chute, west of Chimney Rock, past where the trail dissolved into nothing but red dust and shadow, she found partial prints. Not boot treads, not tire marks. Bare feet, 3 sets, all heading into a slot canyon so narrow the sun barely touched its base. She radioed it in. Within minutes, 2 rangers and a dog handler joined her at the edge. The footprints were staggered, not side by side. Whoever walked there had moved single file. The prints were light at first, then deeper, as if the walkers had slowed down, become unsure. Then, just like that, they stopped. No drag marks, no scuffing, just gone. The slot canyon ended in a sheer rock face, and the ground turned to hard stone. No continuation. No signs they turned back, as if the desert had erased them. An hour later, further east, near a jagged ridgeline called the Devil's Spine, another team found something else. A clear plastic water bottle, half buried in sand. Its label sun-faded but legible, Great Value Spring Water. Ethan's parents confirmed he'd bought a case from Walmart the night before the trip. Inside, there was still some water left. No prints, no blood. Just a single strand of long black hair caught beneath the cap. The rangers bagged it and flagged the area. No other sign of the teens emerged that day. No dropped packs, no clothing, no signal pings. The bottle and those fading footprints were all the desert allowed. As the search teams regrouped that evening, the wind began to rise, kicking sand across the stone, swallowing every trace left behind. Elise Morton stood at the canyon's mouth, arms crossed, staring into the shadows. "Whatever happened to them," she said quietly, "started in there." She wasn't wrong, she just didn't know how right she was. By the second week, the story had outgrown the desert. It leapt from local news to national headlines, then to online forums where armchair sleuths and survival experts tore apart every clue like jackals. 4 teens lost in Utah wilderness, the headlines screamed, but no one could agree on what had actually happened. Theories bloomed like wildflowers after rain. Some said it was dehydration, a wrong turn, the kind of tragedy the maze was known for: beautiful, brutal, final. Others blamed mountain lions or flash floods, pointing to how fast weather could change out there, how even experienced hikers vanished without a trace. But then came the stranger theories. On a hiker's Reddit thread, a man named RiverDog67 posted a grainy photo taken in 2015, 3 small orbs of light hovering above the Devil's Spine at twilight. He claimed the area was a hotspot for non-human activity. That post racked up over 8.0 shares in 2 days. Locals weren't surprised. Stories had circulated for decades. Whispers of people hearing voices where there was no one. Glimpses of figures standing motionless atop the cliffs at dusk. A park ranger who'd quit mid-season once claimed the rocks didn't stay still at night. Old-timers in Moab muttered about a place in the maze where compasses spin backwards. One man, a Navajo elder, warned that the teens may have wandered into a place they weren't supposed to enter, a place the desert protects. And then there were the carvings. A canyon guide named Patrice found strange symbols etched into a remote wall not listed on any tourist maps. Circles within circles, arrows pointing into the earth. She swore they hadn't been there the year before. The rangers logged every tip, every sighting, every scrap of speculation. Most led nowhere. But the story was no longer just about 4 teenagers. It had become a legend. And in a town like Moab, legends never really go away. They just wait for someone new to disappear. The missing posters went up faster than anyone expected. Ethan, Maya, Connor, Riley. 4 smiling faces printed in color, taped to gas station windows, pinned to bulletin boards, held up during interviews on the courthouse steps. Have you seen them? In those first few weeks, their families became unwilling celebrities. Reporters crowded front lawns. News vans idled in church parking lots. Parents who had once quietly packed lunches and signed permission slips were now standing behind podiums, begging for help. Ethan's father, Mark Ridge, spoke with clenched fists and dry eyes. "My son is not a runaway. He's a good kid. They all are. We just want them home." Riley's mother, Maria, could barely finish her sentence before collapsing into sobs. Connor's sister handed out water to search teams and refused to leave the park's visitor center. But it was Maya's mother, Lynn, who drew the most attention. She brought copies of Maya's journal to the authorities, hoping for some breadcrumb they might have missed. Pages filled with sketches, half-written thoughts, musings about the desert, about growing up, about being caught between childhood and whatever came next. One entry stood out. April 20, 2018. Ethan keeps saying this trip is about making memories, but I think he just wants to get away. Riley's been acting weird. Connor doesn't talk much anymore. We're all pretending like we're okay, but it feels like something is coming apart. Another, scrawled messily in the margin, I had that dream again, the one where we walk into the canyon but can't get out, like the rocks are watching us. Authorities didn't know what to do with that. Was it teenage melodrama? Or something more? The parents hoped, prayed that maybe one of them had just wanted to vanish for a while, to escape into the wild and come back when the world felt manageable again. But as days turned to weeks, hope began to rot into something else, something heavier, something darker. By day 29, the search was scaled back. Not officially ended, just paused, pending new evidence. But the truth hung in the dry Utah air like dust that never settles. The canyon had given nothing, and it wasn't going to start now. The headlines moved on. New disasters, new faces. The teens' names drifted from the national conversation, held only in the minds of those who had loved them, parents, siblings, old friends who now avoided trailheads and flinched at the sound of wind through rocks. A final report was issued by the Park Service. Words like unresolved, inconclusive, no evidence of foul play. But there was one sentence that stayed with everyone who read it. At this time, we are unable to determine the whereabouts or status of the missing individuals. That's how it ended neatly, clinically, terrifying in its emptiness. The posters faded in the sun, the interviews stopped, and the desert, as always, kept its secrets. For 7 years, there was only silence. Until, one morning outside a gas station near Moab, a barefoot young man stumbled out of the heat, whispered, "There were 4 of us," and collapsed. It was July 8, 2025, when a man flagged down a delivery truck 5 miles outside Hanksville, Utah. The driver thought he was seeing a ghost, shirtless, barefoot, skin like parchment, long hair matted with dirt, walking along the desert road like he had no destination. The driver pulled over, rolled down his window, and the man just stood there, silent, staring. "Need help?" the driver asked. The man nodded slowly, then rasped out a name, Connor Hale. The driver's heart sank. He knew that name. Everyone in Utah did. Connor collapsed before he could say another word. Authorities arrived within 20 minutes. He was unconscious by then, curled in the dirt like an abandoned animal. The paramedics treated him for dehydration on the spot. One of them whispered, "Could it really be him?" But no one said it out loud. Not yet. He was airlifted to St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction, Colorado. The media hadn't caught wind of it yet. The sheriff's office wanted confirmation first. They had to be sure. When Connor woke up in the ICU, he didn't ask where he was. He didn't ask how long he'd been gone. He only asked one thing. Did they find the others? He weighed 117 pounds. For an adult male, that was skeletal. He had fractured ribs that had healed improperly, missing molars, and skin mottled with scar tissue, some of it old and silvery, some pink and fresh. A nurse noted what looked like ligature marks around his ankles. Another discovered strange symmetrical scarring on his back, circular, like cauterizations, burned clean into the flesh. But what disturbed them most were the tattoos. One on his forearm, a crude spiral made from interlocked figures, their limbs curling inward. One behind his ear, a small eye with no pupil, inked in jagged black lines. He had no memory of getting them. He remembered flashes, dark tunnels, chanting, torches, a name whispered over and over, the kin. Blood work showed he'd survived on next to nothing, starvation cycles, severe dehydration, exposure. But there were also signs of long-term confinement, bone density loss, vitamin deficiencies. His body told a story even he couldn't fully articulate. They ran his fingerprints, still a match. Then came the dental records. A perfect alignment with Connor Hale's last known chart from his childhood dentist in Salt Lake City. After 7 years, the mystery wasn't solved. It was only just beginning, because Connor Hale had returned. But the others hadn't. They waited 2 days before questioning him. Doctors said his vitals had stabilized, but the trauma, the psychological damage, was another story entirely. Connor Hale barely spoke. He ate like a stray animal, flinching at sudden movement, eyeing every doorway like someone might come through it uninvited. When the sheriff and an FBI agent entered his hospital room with a recorder and soft voices, Connor didn't even look up at first. He just stared at the window, where the blinds were drawn tightly shut. "Connor," the agent said gently, "can you tell us where you've been?" He didn't answer for 37 seconds. Then, without looking at either of them, he whispered, "It took me this long to get out." The agents exchanged glances. The sheriff leaned forward. "Out of where?" Connor blinked slowly. "Underground." "What do you mean? A mine? A cave?" He shook his head. "Not on the maps. Not anything you'll find. We didn't even know it was real at first." His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. He spoke in short bursts, paused often, like he was pulling each word up from a well no one else could see. "They told us it was safer there, that the world had ended, that the air was poisoned up top. It was easier to believe them, in the beginning." He rubbed at the tattoo on his arm like he hadn't noticed it until that moment. The agent asked about the others, Ethan, Maya, Riley. Connor closed his eyes. "They were with me. For a while." The room went still. "Connor, are they still alive?" He didn't respond, just one more whisper. "They were watching us." The next session lasted 4 hours. Connor sat under a blanket in the hospital's psych wing, pale as ash, recounting what he could through the haze of malnutrition, trauma, and 7 years of whatever hell he'd endured. He said it started the second night in the maze, after the wind picked up. They'd camped near a rock formation Ethan called Cave Arch. At some point, someone or something approached. They never saw faces, only flickers of movement, low voices that didn't sound like English. Then the lights, small orbs drifting through the trees. "We thought it was a prank, locals messing with us." That night, Ethan disappeared. They took us in shifts, one by one, dragged us down. Connor described being blindfolded, carried for what felt like hours, then waking up underground. Not in a mine or natural cave, a constructed place. Corridors carved with tools, not time. Walls marked with symbols. No sunlight. Artificial lamps that buzzed. It wasn't a shelter. It was a system, built to keep us in. He remembered narrow rooms with dirt floors, echoes of chanting in the dark, meals left without a sound, people in cloaks silent, faceless. A schedule. Lights on, lights off, drills, rituals, cleansings. They called themselves the Kin, he said. Said we were chosen, said we'd been found. He insisted they were still there underground, deeper than anyone had ever searched. They watched us sleep, watched us think. They knew when we lied. He leaned in, eyes bloodshot. "You have no idea how deep it goes." No one spoke for a long time after that. The agents shut off the recorder, but they both knew whatever they'd been investigating for 7 years had just taken a turn. The cave hadn't been on the map. Not on the printed one, not on the GPS. But Ethan spotted it while scrambling up a ledge near the Devil's Spine, the sun catching the dark slit of an opening in the cliffside. He shouted down to the others, eyes lit with that wild, reckless spark he always got when the trail ran out and the real adventure began. "We've got to check this out," he called. "It probably loops back to the trail." Connor hesitated. "We should mark the entrance just in case." But Ethan was already inside, his voice echoing, "Come on, it's perfect. Cool air, shade. This might actually lead somewhere." Maya followed reluctantly, sketchbook in her backpack. Riley rolled his eyes but went in too, muttering something sarcastic about horror movies and bad decisions. Connor took one last look at the sunlit canyon before ducking into the darkness. The air inside was cooler. Still, it smelled of minerals and damp stone. Their headlamps flickered as they descended. At first it felt like any other cave-tight passages, low ceilings, pockets of silence that made even footsteps feel intrusive. Ethan led, as always. His confidence was infectious, but beneath it there was something else, a pressure in the air, a hum Connor couldn't explain. The walls narrowed, then widened again, the path dipping deeper. The floor beneath them was smoother than expected, almost deliberately shaped. Ethan claimed they were close to a connecting trail. That caves like these often had natural exits if you followed the airflow. But the deeper they went, the less sense the path made. No drafts, no bats, no light. Just tunnel after tunnel. They passed a stone arch so low they had to crawl under it. Maya brushed her hand along the wall and paused. "There are symbols here," she whispered. They looked like spirals. Clusters of dots. Something like an eye. No one said it, but they all felt it. They weren't the first ones to come this way. And they might not be the first who never came back. The collapse wasn't dramatic. No rumbling, no earthquake. Just a sudden, sickening crack like bones snapping and then silence. Dust, screams, then nothing. It happened as they passed through a narrow choke point, the sandstone weakened by years of water and neglect. Ethan was ahead, Maya just behind him. Riley had ducked to tie his shoe. Connor was last. The ceiling caved in behind them. When the dust settled, the exit was gone. Panic came in waves. Maya screamed for help, her voice swallowed by the stone. Ethan banged his flashlight against the rubble until it shattered. Riley punched the wall. Connor checked the air, the stability, already going into survival mode. They tried clearing the blockage, hands raw, eyes stinging, but the rock was solid, immovable. They were trapped. Hours passed in pitch black, until someone, Connor thinks it was Maya, remembered the spare headlamp in her pack. The beam cut through the darkness, casting harsh shadows on smooth stone. That's when they saw it. Not natural rock. Carved steps. Old, worn smooth by something other than time. Ethan insisted they go deeper. "It has to lead out somewhere," he said. "Someone made this. It's a system." They walked for hours. Through silence so thick, it pressed on their ears. The air got colder, heavier. They passed alcoves that looked like storage spaces, carved niches, burnt-out torches in rusted brackets, and on one wall, scratched deep into stone with what looked like a nail or bone. "We thought this led out too." "Oh." Maya took a photo. Riley swore and turned around, only to realize they'd lost the way they came. The tunnels twisted behind them like a knot. No trail, no light. They weren't just stuck. They were lost inside something that didn't want them to leave. They didn't find their way deeper into the cave. They were found. Connor's voice broke when he said that during his third interview. "We weren't alone," he whispered. "They knew we were there. I think they'd been watching us since the canyon." He described the first moment, an old man's face lit by torchlight, carved with soot and age, leaning out of the dark. No words, just a slow nod. Then more emerged, silent and pale, clothed in patchwork robes stitched from canvas and deer hide. They moved like they didn't need light, like the tunnels were home. The teens were too weak to fight, no food, no water, no idea where they were. So they followed, down deeper, through echoing corridors that twisted like roots beneath the desert. The place they were taken to wasn't a cave, it was a settlement. Connor called it the Hollow. A vast chamber carved into the stone, dotted with oil lamps and sleeping mats, clay urns, fire pits, and altars. Along the walls, symbols, spirals, eyes, teeth. The markings Maya had seen at Cave Arch were everywhere here, bigger, darker, painted in a red that looked too thick to be dye. They called themselves the Kin. A man named Elias spoke for them, tall, draped in cloth, with an unsettling calmness to his voice. "You've been chosen," he said, "brought below to be cleansed." When Ethan asked what that meant, Elias only smiled. "The surface is lost," he said. "Poisoned, loud, dying. Down here we begin again." They believed the world above had ended in chaos and fire, that the few survivors, like the 4 teens, had been guided to salvation. Connor said they seemed convinced it was all divine predestined. He said the worst part was, for a time, they almost believed it too. The rules began immediately. No names, no pasts, no talk of the surface. They were stripped of their clothing, given robes, and separated, assigned to different chambers inside the hollow. Each day began with silence. Then a cleansing, a ritual where they were made to kneel beneath freezing water poured from a clay jug followed by prayer. Always prayer. The same words, over and over. The light above deceives. The dark below reveals. They weren't beaten, not at first. It was slower, subtle, psychological. Sleep deprivation, isolation, reconditioning, they called it. Maya was taken for teaching, Ethan for repentance. Connor was put to work digging tunnels that already seemed endless. But Riley, he never played along. He refused the chance, refused the food, snapped at the guides when they approached. One night, Connor heard the screams. He wasn't supposed to, but his chamber was close to what the kin called the inner room. Riley's voice, crying, yelling something Connor couldn't make out. Then nothing. They didn't see him for 2 days after that. When he returned, he wasn't the same. His eye was swollen shut. He wouldn't speak. He wouldn't look at them. He fought back, Connor told the investigators. They made an example of him. Riley never fought again. After that, the others stopped fighting too. By the 3rd year, the hollow had become routine. That's what Connor hated most. He no longer woke up, afraid, just numb. The prayers, the washings, the silence, they became clockwork. Even the fear lost its edge, worn dull by repetition. He stopped marking time on the wall after the scratches passed 700. What was the point? Ethan, though. Ethan never adjusted. He kept pushing, even in whispers. "We have to get out," he'd say late at night when the watchers were asleep. "This place isn't salvation. It's a coffin." Maya started to drift inward. She barely spoke, instead drawing in the dirt with bits of charcoal. Eyes, teeth, circles. The same symbols the kin carved into the walls. Sometimes she didn't respond when Connor called her name, just stared past him like she was listening to something he couldn't hear. But Ethan stayed sharp, angry, alive. He had a plan. There was a chamber near the eastern end of the hollow where the air moved differently, cooler, like it connected to something. He believed there was a vent shaft or natural fissure nearby. They could hear water rushing, faint but constant. One night, during a cleansing, Ethan slipped away. Connor had passed him a piece of broken bone sharpened into a blade, a crude tool, but better than nothing. He was supposed to come back by dawn. He didn't. For 2 days, there was no word. Then Elias addressed the community during the evening prayer. "Some light must be extinguished," he said calmly, "so the rest may remain pure." That night, a guide placed Ethan's robe outside Connor's chamber, neatly folded, damp. Maya didn't speak for a week. Connor didn't sleep for a month. But that was when he began to plan his own way out. The tunnel was a mistake, at least. That's what the kin called it. It was sealed years ago, Connor believed, after someone else had tried to escape. A woman named Solène, barely a whisper among the older members. She betrayed the dark, they'd said. She went into the fire, but the tunnel still existed. Half buried, forgotten. Connor found it while gathering firewood from the outer chambers. The air was different there, fresher, and the ground had shifted slightly after a tremor that cracked one of the support beams. A corner of the wall had collapsed, revealing a low crawl space behind it. He didn't tell anyone. Not Maya. Not even Riley. It was too late for them by then. So he waited. Gathered supplies slowly, a strip of dried root, a stolen canteen, a length of rope. He hollowed the heel of his sandal and hid a shard of flint inside. Then one night, after the final prayer, he slipped away. The tunnel was tighter than he expected, claustrophobic, airless. He crawled for hours, sometimes belly flat, until the ceiling lifted and the ground rose sharply. When he saw the first sliver of moonlight between the rocks, he wept. He emerged somewhere south of the maze, his eyes burning from years underground. The stars above were so bright they hurt. Then he walked 40 miles across the desert. No shoes, no shade, nothing but salt wind and sun-scorched stone. He hallucinated faces in the cliffs, whispers on the wind. At one point, he passed a cairn with a strip of green fabric tied to it. The same one they'd ignored 7 years ago. He didn't sleep, didn't stop, just kept walking toward nothing, because even nothing was better than what he'd left behind. When the truck stopped beside him near Hanksville, he barely remembered raising his hand. And when they asked who he was, His voice cracked as he said, "There were 4 of us." The story broke within hours. Missing teen reappears after 7 years in Utah desert, claims he escaped from underground cult. The headlines spread like wildfire. News crews descended on Grand Junction. Microphones filled the hospital lobby. Satellite trucks lined the street. A photo of Connor's sunken cheeks, distant eyes, hospital gown draped over his skeletal frame, became the image of a mystery that had haunted the country for nearly a decade. He didn't speak to the press. But he didn't need to. The FBI confirmed his identity. His prints, dental records, even a birthmark on his left shoulder. Connor Hale was undeniably one of the 4 teenagers who vanished in 2018. Now, he was the only one who had come back. A task force was formed within a week. Operatives from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, Missing Persons Division, and even domestic terrorism units assembled in Moab. They called it Operation Hollow Echo. Search efforts reignited. This time with tech. The 2018 search never had thermal drones, ground-penetrating radar, satellite overlays. Connor's crude sketches of the tunnel system were digitized, mapped, analyzed. But the area he described was massive. And if the kin existed, they were experts in staying hidden. Tips poured in from across the Four Corners region. People who claimed they'd seen figures moving at night in canyons. Others who swore they'd encountered off-grid communities with strange rules and blank eyes. One former hiker emailed a photo of a symbol carved into a tree near Escalante, a spiral with an eye at its center. The FBI took it seriously. Because what Connor described wasn't just a survival story, it was a system, organized, built, ancient. And if the kin were still down there, they weren't just a cult, they were an ecosystem. And they had learned how to erase people without leaving a trace. The first to arrive at the hospital was Lynn Black, Maya's mother. She hadn't changed much. Same quiet eyes, same purse held tightly in front of her chest like a shield. When she saw Connor, she didn't rush to him or demand answers. She just sat in the corner and wept. Others weren't as gentle. Ethan's father, Mark Ridge, appeared on live television 2 days later, demanding a full briefing from the FBI. If Connor escaped, where are the others? Why didn't he bring them back? What's he not telling us? Riley's family remained silent. His mother had moved to Oregon in 2020, trying to outrun the memory. Now, reporters camped outside her apartment. She refused interviews. Connor asked to see them, any of them. The FBI declined. Too soon, they said. Too unstable. Divisions quickly emerged. Some parents clung to Connor's story as hope. If he made it out, maybe the others were still alive. Maybe they were just waiting for rescue. Others whispered doubts. Had Connor imagined it? Hallucinated? Been alone all this time? Mind unraveling in the wilderness? The talk of tunnels, chanting cleansings. It sounded too far-fetched, too cinematic. A clinical psychologist on cable news suggested Connor was suffering from a delusion. Extreme isolation, she explained. Trauma can create false memory systems. He may have needed a story to survive. But Maya's sister posted a page from her journal on social media, the one with the dream. We walk into the canyon but can't get out, like the rocks are watching us. The post went viral, and just like that, the public opinion shifted again. Because if Connor was lying, how did Maya know? 7 years ago? Maybe he wasn't crazy. Maybe he was the only one telling the truth. They brought in the polygraph on day 15. It wasn't for evidence it wouldn't hold in court, but the FBI needed clarity. The agents had spent hours dissecting Connor's interviews, comparing details, timelines, psychological cues. He was erratic, yes, traumatized, clearly, but consistent. Still, they had to know. The questions were simple, direct. Did you enter a cave system with the others in April of 2018? Yes. Were you held against your will? Yes. Did you witness the deaths or disappearance of Ethan Ridge, Maya Black, or Riley Sampson? A long pause, then, yes. Did you fabricate any part of your story to mislead investigators? No. The results were clear. Connor Hale was telling the truth. Or, at the very least, he believed he was. That night, the FBI issued a quiet internal memo. Proceed with containment, not contradiction. But what changed everything was what came next. A retired detective from Arizona reached out. He'd worked a case in 2004. Two college students vanished while backpacking near Navajo Mountain. No signs of struggle, no bodies. One left a journal behind in their tent with a single phrase, "The dark below is the way forward." The words matched one of Connor's quotes exactly. Other reports surfaced scattered, decades apart. A solo hiker in 1981. A guide who walked into a slot canyon in 96 and never came back. An oil surveyor in 2007 who claimed to have seen hooded figures in the distance, then rescinded his story 2 days later. They had all occurred within a 200-mile radius, all near the maze. The FBI's database flagged a pattern. What Connor escaped wasn't an isolated group. It was part of something older, something that had been pulling people into the rock for years and letting none return. Until now. The email came from a burner account. No name, no subject line, just a single message. "He's not the first. I've seen the marks too. Meet me." The FBI traced the IP to a remote cabin near Monticello, Utah. When they arrived, a man stood waiting by a fire pit, holding a notebook and wearing a faded NPS cap. His name was Dale Riker, former backcountry ranger, Canyonlands, 1988, 2005. He'd resigned abruptly after what he called a disagreement with protocol. What he showed investigators that day changed the entire trajectory of the case. Inside his notebook were sketches of petroglyphs, spirals, eyes, jagged figures painted in ochre and charcoal, all from unmarked canyons within the maze. Most were never photographed, never reported. Then he opened a topographic map. He'd drawn symbols over the park notations from decades of solo patrols. The places with odd compass behavior, where animals refused to nest, where hikers reported hearing voices or seeing lights, the same areas Connor had described from memory. And in the center of it all, Riker had written a name. Not on any government record, not in any geological database. The Hollow. "This is what they called it," he told them. "I heard it once, long time ago, from a kid who came running out of the backcountry in 94, said he'd seen a woman with no eyes whispering in the rocks." "Let me guess," one agent said. "No one believed him?" Riker nodded. "The desert makes people see things, that's what they said." He tapped the map. "But what if it's not the desert?" He handed them a copy of an old ranger incident log, long buried in the archive, handwritten, no official report ever filed. In the margin, one line was circled in red ink. "Group observed entering canyon. 4 individuals. Only 3 shadows visible." That entry was dated April 4, 2018. 2 days before the teens disappeared, they waited for cooler weather before sending in the team. Late September 2025, a tactical expedition of 6 agents, 2 geologists, a tracker, and a medic. They hiked in from a blind ridge above the Devil's Spine, guided not by GPS but by Connor's memory and Dale Riker's old ranger maps. No helicopters, no drones. The kin, if they still existed, would hear them coming. For 2 days, they followed barely, their trails through scorched brush and sandstone corridors, winding deeper into the maze. On the 3rd morning, just after dawn, they found the entrance. It wasn't a cave mouth, not at first glance, just a depression in the cliffside, half covered by a fall of rocks and sun-bleached branches. But beneath it, a narrow opening revealed smooth-cut stone, man-made, hidden, ancient. Inside, it smelled of smoke and dust. The tunnel ran 20 feet before splitting into 3 smaller corridors, 2 collapsed, 1 passable. They found symbols etched into the walls, spirals, open palms, crude faces with hollow eyes. Connor's symbols, exactly as he described. Then came the remnants, a circle of ash and stones, an extinguished fire pit. Mats made from deer hide and fraying canvas, pressed flat by years of weight. Scraps of clothing woven into bedding. Broken clay cups. A crude altar made from stacked bones, animal, mostly. And beneath a pile of sand and shattered pottery, a ring, thin, silver, bent from pressure. Engraved on the inside, M.B. Maya Black. They pressed on, found more chambers. A crude hallway that descended sharply, ending in a sealed stone wall covered in black markings. A spiral encircled by tally marks, 99 of them. And one clean space where the 100th should have been. One agent muttered, "They were keeping count." Another whispered, "Of what?" The entrance was sealed behind them as they left, flagged and documented. The FBI quietly classified the location. Officially, it didn't exist, but they all knew the truth. Connor hadn't escaped a metaphor. He'd escaped a place. They found it tucked beneath a pile of rocks, wrapped in layers of cloth and wax paper, hidden in the far end of a chamber nicknamed the Gallery, a room where symbols covered every inch of the walls. The search team almost missed it, but one of the geologists, brushing dust off a collapsed shelf, knocked loose a corner of fabric. Inside was Maya's sketchbook. The cover was warped, pages curled with moisture and time, but the drawings were intact, beautiful, disturbing. Portraits of Ethan, Riley, and Connor, sketched in candlelight. Symbols repeated over and over, hands reaching upward, spirals within eyes, a black sun. The first half was familiar. Notes about their early days in the maze, observations, fear, isolation. Then the tone shifted. One entry, "They say we're the 4 that were promised." The prophecy told them. 3 will remain in the dark. 1 must carry the memory into the light. Another, "They keep repeating it. The pattern has been seen. The hollow is ready. The wheel must turn again." On page 47, a chilling sketch. Ethan's face, eyes closed, a spiral carved into his forehead. On the next page, a crude drawing of the cave system, with arrows pointing inward and a final note scribbled in the margin. "If someone finds this, please don't follow it. The kin aren't gone. They're waiting." Maya's handwriting grew more frantic in the last pages. Notes fragmented, words scratched out. One line repeated in thicker and thicker pen strokes, "The 100th is the gate. The 100th is the gate. The 100th is the gate." And then, abruptly, the journal ends. They sealed it in a bio-proof case and airlifted it to Quantico. Officially, the FBI called it evidence. Unofficially, those who read it called it something else. A warning. They ran the blood samples twice, first on site with a mobile forensic unit, then again at the lab in Denver. Both results came back the same. Type O negative, male. A familial match to the DNA Riley's mother had submitted in 2018. The blood was old, dried deep into the stone floor of a narrow chamber Connor hadn't mentioned, a place the team named the Room Without Echo because even whispered words inside seemed to vanish instead of bounce. The stains formed a smeared arc on the ground, not far from what appeared to be crude restraints, ropes fused into the rock by years of tension and sand. But no body, no bones, nothing else, just blood. The silence around it was heavier than any declaration. Even the FBI agents who'd seen the worst the world had to offer stood still a little too long. "Riley was here," one of them finally said. "But was he still?" Connor was informed the next day. He didn't ask how much, didn't ask if it was recent. He only asked, "Was it in the inner room?" They didn't answer. What troubled investigators more was how little else they found. No mass grave, no remains, not even loose hair or teeth or scraps of clothing from the other 2. They were hoping to find closure. Evidence of death, at least. But the hollow had given them only one clue, and even that was wrapped in ambiguity. Had the others died, been taken elsewhere, or somehow still lived? Connor didn't believe they were alive, but he didn't believe they were dead, either. They weren't sacrifices, he said. They were part of something, a process, a pattern. He refused to elaborate. When asked what the 100th is the gate meant, he simply said, "Ask them when you find them." It began with scattered reports easily dismissed at first. A camper near Shiprock claimed he saw 5 figures walking in single file through the desert at dusk, cloaked in robes, faces hidden. Another hiker outside Bluff, Utah, found a spiral burned into the trunk of a juniper tree. Then came the whispers in Cortez, Farmington Page. A gas station clerk told a reporter that a pale man with hollow eyes and strange tattoos bought supplies and paid in worn coins older than any he'd seen. A reservation security officer swore she saw a bonfire off a closed trail one night, with figures circling it in complete silence, each sighting different. But the symbols were always the same: spirals, eyes, circles made of interlocked hands. And then, in late October, a photo was posted anonymously to a fringe forum, a snapshot of a highway underpass outside Kayenta. Spray, painted on the wall, was a chilling phrase in block letters. "The 100th has opened." Connor saw the photo during his supervised therapy session. He stared at it for nearly 5 minutes, saying nothing. Then, "They're moving." "Who?" the therapist asked. He didn't blink. "The kin. They're done hiding. They're recruiting again." "Why now?" He finally looked up. "Because I wasn't the first escape. I was just the one they let go." That night, the FBI issued an internal alert across the Four Corners region. "Be advised, possible reemergence of off-grid extremist group known as the kin, considered active, mobile, and psychologically manipulative. Avoid direct contact. Report all sightings." Because it was no longer a question of if the kin had survived. It was only a question of how many more they were willing to take. The book hit shelves in January 2026. The Caves Beneath Us. A Survivor's Testament by Connor Hale. It wasn't ghostwritten. Every word came from him, typed during long, sleepless nights under fluorescent hospital lights, edited during therapy sessions, reviewed with FBI oversight. At first, publishers hesitated. The material was too dark, too speculative. But once the leaks started, they realized something else. This wasn't just a memoir. It was a phenomenon. The opening chapter described Ethan's final night. The last words he whispered in the dark. The way Maya had traced spirals on the cave wall with a piece of bone. The sound of Riley being dragged away, his scream cut off mid-syllable. Critics were divided. Some called it pure fiction, trauma-fueled horror, dripping with delusion and mythos. Others praised it as a haunting meditation on captivity and survival. A New York Times reviewer simply wrote, "If even half of this is true, we've been walking above hell for a very long time." But for readers, especially those near Canyonlands, it struck something deeper. The symbols Connor described began appearing again. Spray painted on abandoned sheds, scratched into bus stops, carved into sandstone. People claimed the book opened something. "The kin aren't a cult," one reader wrote online. "They're a threshold," and Connor opened the door. Connor refused interviews. He didn't go on tour. He didn't sign copies. He just disappeared again. Last anyone heard, he was living under a false name near Missoula. Off-grid, same as the people who'd taken him. When asked by his editor if he believed they were still watching him, Connor reportedly said, "They never stopped." August 28, 2026. Nearly a year to the day since Connor re-emerged from the desert, a ranger at a remote Utah trailhead near Horseshoe Canyon arrived early to prep for the morning tours. The sun was still low, casting long shadows over the dust and stone. And there, beside the entrance sign, just beneath a faded missing poster for 4 teenagers, was a small bouquet of white flowers. Fresh. At first, he assumed it was a tourist gesture. But something felt off. He checked the trailhead camera, an old, motion-triggered surveillance system maintained more out of habit than need. The footage, grainy and time-stamped 4:13 a.m., showed a single figure stepping out of the darkness. Slim, wearing a long hooded coat. She approached the trailhead slowly, placed the flowers, looked directly into the camera. The frame froze for just a second. Then she turned and vanished into the canyon. The ranger flagged the footage. When investigators enhanced the stills, their blood ran cold. The eyes, the face, the mark near the left ear, half hidden by hair, but unmistakable. It looked exactly like Maya Black. But Maya hadn't been seen in 8 years. Not alive, not above ground. The FBI requested the footage quietly. No press release, no confirmation. But internally, a new file was opened. Case: Black Maya. Status changed from presumed deceased, unknown. As for the flowers, they were pressed into evidence. But no one noticed the slip of paper tucked beneath them until weeks later. On it, handwritten in charcoal, "The 100th has opened. The kin remembers." The camera never caught anyone coming back to retrieve it, because whoever left it was already gone. or had never truly left at all. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.